What is up, all you real estate loving individuals? This is episode number 15 of the Real Estate Take podcast, and I'm your host, Wendell Butler. This is your go-to podcast with tons of information regarding the current real estate market, where we get various real estate professionals' current take on different areas of real estate. For today's guest, we have John Marchese. John Marchese has been a real estate investor since 2017. He got his start in the way he believes most people should, with a simple two-family house hack. However, his love for real estate and everything property-related started long before that. Having grown up in the construction industry and starting his first construction company, Kitchens By Lombco, 8 years ago, John now has a rental portfolio of 23 units, has completed 3 flips, and is the owner of Marchese Development, which consists of new construction and large redevelopment projects throughout Massachusetts. Over the last year, John has also set his goals on building a large commercial real estate company with his 2 partners, Matt and Ryan. We actually had Ryan on this podcast way back, which is pretty cool. Blue Canyon Equity Partners aims to acquire large-scale properties with value-add potential that will allow them to provide high-quality housing to members of the local community. So let's invite John in here. And John, how you doing today?
Very good. How are you?
Doing good, man. I appreciate you coming on. I've always wanted to talk with you and get to know you because I've talked with Ryan many times. Me and Ryan are pretty close, and we started in real estate kind of the same time, but I never really got to meet you. So I'm excited to learn more about you and have you spread some knowledge.
Awesome. I just heard you read my bio, and I probably should have edited that because I feel like I'm on 10 flips now, and I don't even know how many rentals I have currently. So I should probably update that.
Yeah, you got to update that. When you start going, like you just start flying in real estate. When you start, it's crazy.
Such a snowball effect, which is beautiful.
Yeah. Like I was talking to someone yesterday, and they were planning to do like 1 flip a year and then 1 build a year. And then all of a sudden now they're doing like 6 or 7 within like 3 months. And I'm like, yeah, that's what happens. You get the bug.
Yes.
Cool. So let's just start with the basics and just learning about who you are and what really got you into real estate and what's kind of a backstory about you and where you currently are.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. And I apologize if I'm a little long-winded because I have a long history relating to real estate and construction. So my father owned a remodeling company my entire life. So he was a small business owner, self-employed, had a couple of carpenters working for him, but he was always in the field, banging nails, getting his hands dirty, but he was also a business owner. So I grew up understanding and seeing what it took to run a small business from day one. So I also worked with him as a kid. So instead of like working at a grocery store, a movie theater, or McDonald's, after school, I'd go work for him, or school vacations, summer vacations. I would just be hired as a carpenter, go on site and learn the trade as carpentry from the ground up. Started with a push broom, just cleaning up sites. And then from there, now I just write checks and delegate work. So it's been a crazy journey in between 12, 14 years old, and I'm now 38 with quite an extensive background in construction.
That's awesome. I mean, it's always cool to see someone that started actually doing like the manual labor and kind of learning that way, and then progressing to learn how to then run individuals that are doing that for you now and kind of run the business. Instead of working in the business, you're working on the business now, which is what everybody should strive to do if you're creating a business.
Yeah, it's that there's a fine line. I mean, tough, especially if you know the cash flow quadrants. I don't know if you're familiar with Robert Kiyosaki's book, but that's a good one where they have entrepreneur, small business owner, investor. And I'm trying to get up to investor where all I have to do is write checks and my money makes me more money. But it's been a long journey. One thing that I can say, though, that has benefited me, and Wendell and I were speaking about this briefly before, is having that knowledge of the construction industry, having been elbows deep in all sorts of work, learning plumbing, learning electrical, learning drywall, roofing, everything. It allows me to expand and trust my construction company when it comes to getting the work done. Because a lot of times as a real estate investor, you're hiring contractors and other disciplines, and you might not know how they all blend together, orders of operations of jobs. So that has been a benefit. I was also told as a kid, like I grew up in the industry, just part-time here and there, but I was told I need to go to college. So my parents, both college educated, even though my father started a construction company, really thought it was important for me to go get a higher education, which I reluctantly went and did. And believe me, I enjoyed it. However, my major was anthropology and sociology. And I graduated in 2008 with my undergraduate degree. And I remember that year, like the world's collapsing and professors were like, there's no jobs out there, stay in school, get your master's. I'm like, I've had enough enough of school. I'm like, I didn't even want to get this degree. I'm like, I'm out of here. But going into the real world in 2008 was tough because, it was devastating. So there weren't any new jobs. Everyone was losing their jobs. It was a wild time in our lifetime, one of many that we've all lived through at this point. So that was an interesting aspect of my life.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's actually a benefit that you went through that and was actually in like the working field when that was occurring, especially in the real estate field, as you like were starting to get interest in that. Because you got to see housing market collapse basically in 2008, but then you got to see the rebound. So now you're a little bit more experienced and you went into the market or started working within that market of real estate probably in the most difficult time. So did that like build like thick skin for you a little bit or?
Well, yes and no. So that was an important experience. But to be honest, I took my anthropology degree and sociology degree. And after coming home for a month, I graduated in December because I had to do an extra semester because I kind of goofed off a little bit in school. I came home in December, worked for my father's company for a month, just banging nails. And then I bought a one-way ticket to Spain and I didn't come back from Europe for a year. So I just like backpacked as a kid out of college, wanted to see the world, these other cultures that I've been reading about and researching for the last 4 years. I wanted to go experience it. So I didn't actually start working until my mid 20s. I spent my entire 20s traveling the world, living in all sorts of different places, living behind the scenes. Like after 10 days of being in Spain, for example, because I had that construction background, I was on a volunteer website called Help Exchange. I don't know if it's still around that, and couch surfing, but I ended up in the Abuhara mountain range in the south of Spain, building a couple's dream house. And like, oh yeah, you have construction experience? Come on. So I just like volunteered and it allowed me to like backpack and travel with very little money. And then it was really cool because I got to experience other ways of building. For example, they use stone and stucco and a lot of brick and used to 2x4 wood construction here in New England. So that was a great experience. But my love for real estate, my interest in real estate didn't start until I was 27 years old. I was living in Malaysia. Talk about like I've been all over the world. I was living in Malaysia for a year and a half and I experienced an insight into new money. So like coming from New England, we're a bit more traditional here. You can't tell if somebody has money or not. They might just be driving a Prius, could be a multimillionaire. You don't know because we don't show it off here. But in Asia, like they came up out of the ground in the last 50 years where there's so much new money there that people like to show it up. People be driving their Ferraris and Lamborghinis down the street. And I'm like, holy cow, that's what money can buy you. I'm like, I need to get on track here and figure out how to make some money. So that's really where it was. It wasn't 2008. It was more like 2013, 2014, where I was actually still overseas in Malaysia and I picked up Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, which like everyone that's listening to this podcast knows because it's 101. And that just really enlightened me to another way of thinking, a non-traditional path forwards in a career and the ability to create wealth. And the simplest thing there that I remember learning is asset and liability and the difference. And a lot of people, even people that have gone through their entire life, still don't understand the difference between an asset and a liability. So just having that in my mind, those two little buckets he draws in his little diagrams in the book that was really for me huge in understanding just investing and where you put your money and how you put it to use. And the fact that like the general public is just so sadly ignorant to money and like finances and like there's no education. Like God, I think I played Monopoly like once in school and that's the closest to like a financial education I had gotten through the public school system. So that's where my real estate career started, sort of like the interest in it. And then I can tell you more where it developed from there.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like even from when you graduated college, like I think just from hearing that, like deep in like your personal like brain and like what you wanted to do, if you didn't know what you wanted to do really, it seems like you didn't want to really work like a 9 to 5 or anything like that. Like you immediately went to a different country and started exploring and kind of just doing your own thing. So you were still trying to explore, trying to figure out kind of what you want to do. And that's the best time to do it. It's right after college for sure. It's either that or it's once you kind of get your business going and then you have some freedom to do it. But
sadly, most people wait. They think when I retire, I'll have all this savings and I'll have the time to do it. But like you've waited your whole life, your energy and your youth is gone. Like I feel so fortunate that I took advantage of that period in my life to explore and do all the things that I wanted to do before I settled down, not only in business, but my personal life as well. Like once you get married and start having kids, like you got to have a source of income. And if that's a W-2 job, that's the sad part. A lot of people are locked into that because they have to put bread on the table. So the ability to, like, what I did personally is I was able to build up some of my businesses before I settled in and had my daughter. So I was relatively comfortable financially and knew that I could provide for family come that time. But a lot of people do it that way.
Yeah, I think a lot of people say to like live in the moment and like don't think about the future too much. But I think it's a combination of, obviously you shouldn't ever like live in the past. You just learn from the past. But living in the moment, yes, and that's what you did. But you also started to think about the future of like, I got to get this now because I know that in the future might not have enough time to do it. And a lot of people fail to do that. They just kind of just live in the moment, don't even think about the future. And then that's when they might have a kid really quick, and then they're kind of locked in, and then they got to figure something out based upon that kid. Because once you have a kid, that's your life now. You got to change everything for that, which is, it's a blessing. It's like, I think it's the meaning of life is to have kids and do that. Some people don't, but to each their own.
Yeah. Honestly,
yeah.
It is. Like, I never wanted a kid up until 35. I had my daughter Isabella, who's turning 3 this month, and it is the most magical thing in the world watching this little person discover the world. Like, everything is new to her. Like, we'll be taking a walk, she'll stop and be looking at like pine cones and acorns and things like that, and it's all like, what's this? What do I hear? Like, these are the questions and I'm like, this is so crazy that the whole world is new to her. And like, one thing that related back to real estate in my businesses now, that I have the time to enjoy that. Most people are at work 9 to 5 and miss all the good bits, and the kids grow up so fast. So like, I love having the ability to have that time and help raise her and be a part of her life. And if I didn't get into real estate and I just ran my one 9 to 5 business, I might not have that ability. So that's something that I'd like to share with people too, especially that are getting started younger before they start settling down. But even after the case, you can always change and do whatever you need to do to get ahead. And I think that whatever Gary Vee calls a side hustle, you got to start doing something to get out of the rat race.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, that's one of the main reasons I'm in real estate is for that, because I don't want to have to miss my kid's baseball game or like my kid's recital or anything like that, or miss like trip with them or anything work. I want to be able to have the freedom to put my family and my children first. And that's the reason I got into real estate, to be honest, one of the main reasons. Obviously, money and freedom is awesome too. But yeah, like you touched on a really good point there. Like, once you have a kid, I don't have one yet, but I feel like it just changes your world. And honestly, I feel like it almost makes everything better and quote unquote easier because you're doing it for her now. And like anything that's hard in life, like your business and stuff, you have like a bigger reason now to do it. So I feel like it's easier to push through because you're like, oh, this isn't just for me anymore. This isn't just for me and my wife. Like, this is for my child. And then you really have like that extra push.
I could mention something on that point before we get to the next question that we spoke about briefly, is people in having no direction in their life and kind of going with the flow, living moment to moment. Because one thing else I discovered back in college was the book The Secret. I don't know, some people might think it's kooky or whatever, but like, it's all about manifestation and basically having a vision for what you want in life. And the sooner you establish that, I just want to help educate your audience. Like, and this is the most basic like principle, like the sooner you have like a goal or visions or multiple goals, the sooner you have something to focus on, where ultimately they call it the power of the universe or whatever in that book, but your life starts to attract the things that you want. But if you don't know what you want and you have no direction and no vision, then the universe doesn't even have the ability to present those opportunities to you. So one thing, I'll flash my camera over here, but I'm sitting in one of my offices right now. But one thing that I have on hand, like wherever I'm, like my screensaver, everything, this is my vision board. Like, that, something I figured out back college, and that vision board I just updated this year. But that's something, a visual that literally you put your house or your business that you want or your family or whatever you want on that, and you look at it, and every day it's a reminder, and it helps you like focus on a visual for focusing on the direction of your life. And that has really, really helped me to achieve my goals. And the craziest thing is, like, I have a file, and I went back to 2017 and saw my vision board, and I was redoing my one for like 2020 because I skipped a couple of years there. And I look outside, and on my vision board, I had a black Range Rover from 2017. I was updating it in 2020. I'm like, in my driveway is the black Range Rover. I forgot that I even had that on my vision board, but because that's what I wanted, that was what I focused on. And it's very materialistic, so don't just focus on that. But it was just wild. And then I would start to do my vision boards. This year, I had to like totally wipe it because all the things that I had on my vision board had come to fruition. I'm like, this is crazy. Like, so it's so important to have goals and vision in your career and your life and in every aspect of it. So I can't harp on that enough because it's something that's really changed. Like everyone I come across, I'm like, you're going to do this. You're going to do a vision board. Like, it's just like, it's really helpful, especially entrepreneurs, I got to say.
Oh yeah, I need to do a vision board for real because
Mhm.
I mean I have it in my brain. I'm not like a type of person to do vision boards, but I need to. I think it'd be
Yeah.
awesome to like look
Yeah.
back at like, oh wow, I hit that because I've definitely hit like so many of my goals, and I look back and sometimes you're just grateful that like you're doing that, and it helps you remind yourself that you are moving forward. Because there's a book that I read that was really good. It's called The Gap and the Gain, where it's to always sit down and look where you came from initially, kind of like where you first started with your vision board, and look back at what you've accomplished to help you like almost be grateful for what you've done. Because if you just keep on thinking about what you want next, you forget about how much you've actually improved. And if you don't look back and like realize what you've came from and you just keep on going for the next thing, you're going to basically get in like a mental cycle of like you're not getting better and you start getting down on yourself. But I guarantee you, when you looked at that vision board, you were probably like, holy shit, like I used to think that this was like the goal and I've already like well past this. And now I got new goals. And it's just like, it makes you feel grateful, makes you feel like you're fulfilling yourself. And I think it's phenomenal. And like, the manifestation that you talked about in the vision boards, I think it's super helpful to do that and help your mindset as you go through like the tough journey of real estate, entrepreneurship, or 9 to 5, whatever you're doing.
And you're 100% right. You have to practice gratitude. Everyone, entrepreneur or not, you've got to practice gratitude. I have an alarm that goes off at 7:45 every morning. It's not my first alarm, but it goes off and it says, what are you grateful for today? It goes off, what are you grateful for? And I make myself say at least one person, one thing, one situation. And you just say that and it brings this like positive energy to you. It helps get the day off on the right foot, but it helps ground you and think about what are you grateful for? And that again, just helps with the mindset. It's so powerful. I used to have a label printed out on my steering wheel. Like, so every day I'd get in my car and it would just say it right in my face. What am I grateful for? Because it's so easy to forget to not practice gratitude. But that's another huge, huge life lesson to do every day. Like I have a friend who's depressed and I'm like, dude, you got to set this alarm on your phone and say, what are you grateful for? And that sort of thing helps change your mindset. You got to have a growth mindset in life.
Yeah, same with like the stress. Life is hard, right? Like the stressors and anxiety of life and things like that can really make it so you cloud your mind and you just start thinking like super narrow and you're like, what's going on? And I catch myself doing it all the time. Like I left my W-2 job of lending like 3 months ago to finally go all in on real estate, right? But there's times in real estate where I'm just like driving to properties and I'm like, one, I shouldn't be driving to this property because it's not what I want with my business. Two, everything's going wrong this week. Three, blah, blah. And then I just have to like sit there and like stop my car and just be like, this is a life of a real estate entrepreneur and this is what I wanted. And like, this is awesome because this is like what me taking on and taking that step to eventually build my business the way I want to. And it's just part of the game. And when I do that and just sit there and like kind of open my mind and be like, stop thinking about the stressors, it's all part of it. It just lifts a weight off your shoulders and you're like, people have to do that. Like just stop and think about like where they are and like where they came from and just kind of what's called like readjust or recalibrate sometimes. Because if you just get caught in that stressor, you don't think about like the things you're grateful for, things like that, you're just going to be stuck on like a depression road or like a stressful anxiety road and you can't get off of it without doing that.
100% right. I'm glad you're already aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody deals with it and it's good to talk about because you see all these things on social media of people like flaunting like, oh, I'm so good at real estate, blah, 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 woo. There's nothing ever that goes wrong with me. It's like, yeah, right, dude. Probably 90% of their life is like stress.
It's a tough road, but that's the problem in general with society and social media because people put themselves to these impossible standards and makes them feel bad about their life because it's not as pretty as you see on Instagram or whatever. So that's a whole nother topic of conversation. So be careful with that, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. So let's make a turn back into
Sure.
a little bit more real estate. This is, I think, mindset and attitude and things like that is all included in real estate. But let's get a little bit more into like specifics on some deals that you've done or what you're actually doing currently. I know that you just finished a flip currently, and it wasn't your first flip. I know you got a ton going on right now, but let's take it all the way back to your first flip. So when you first got started, one was flipping kind of where you wanted to start, or did you like long-term investing? And then take us through like your first deal, kind of in things that you learned from it and like, yeah, how it went.
So leaving Malaysia, reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, coming back, started Kitchens by Lombco with my father. I was doing business development for an Asian guy's company over there, like like meaning glorified sales. So I'm like, I'm building this guy's business. My father's like, come back, you can build this business with me. Talking about Kitchens by Lombco. So I'm starting to do that. And I'm realizing that we still work for clients. Even though you're a business owner, you still have clients, you still have a boss, which is your clients, your customers, whatever it is. So as I'm building up that business, which I still run day to day to this day, which is actually 10 years now, which is wild. But I started to get into real estate because I'm like, I do the construction, I do it for customers. Why don't I do it for myself? So it was 2017. I had been listening to Bigger Pockets pretty aggressively, and everyone knows Bigger Pockets because that's like real estate 101 and a great resource. And I was like, I want to find a multifamily property for my first property. I had like $8,000 or something from my wedding. And I was like, I had no other money because I was just starting this other business. I just come back from Europe. I'm not Europe, Malaysia. I student loaned out. So I had like nothing, like literally nothing. I had this $8,000. I'm like, I want to find a multifamily. So I started like Redfin and Zillow, and I have one of my closest friends who's an agent. And I ended up finding a property. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about towns locations, but in Littleton, Massachusetts. And that is the town I actually grew up in my entire life. And it was just weird that I found this 2-family there right in the center of town. It was a house that was built in 1780. So like the beginning of America. There wasn't a straight freaking line in this house, but it was $280,000. It was like weird and like low ceilings, and it was like old. So it just had sat on the market where I talked to my agent friend. I'm like, can we put an offering and go check this thing out? And then it's got tiny little rooms all blocked off because it's an old style house before open concept. And I'm like, I could do everything with this. I could turn this into a great apartment. So I ended up putting an offer in, getting the property. But the interesting thing here too is I used an FHA back then, and because I only had the $8,000, so it was like 3% or whatever it was back then. But with this FHA, it was like the house was like in bad shape where you really can't buy a house easily that's in bad shape with an FHA because they're like, if you default on the loan, we own this piece of shit, and like they don't want it. So I was literally going in there before my loan would close and like painting some stuff like from flaking paints or like fixing this so they would close. I didn't even own the property yet. So it ended up working out. So I got it for $280. I ended up remodeling the upstairs apartment. So it was like one on top of each other and doing a beautiful job with it. New kitchen, like exposing all the wide yellow Southern pine floors that they used to use, like 13, 16-inch wide floors. Beautiful. And at the time I was staying in the first floor apartment in a couple of rooms, going up there at night, weekends, around work, just like literally, I remember sitting on a paint bucket at like 10 o'clock at night, listening to Bigger Pockets podcast, eating a sandwich after I had painted for like my kitchen for like 5 hours. So I literally did everything there, like did it all myself, just in my free time, as cheaply as you possibly could do it. Moved upstairs into this beautifully renovated apartment, rented downstairs for 2/3 of my mortgage, was living in a town that has become very unaffordable. It's like urban sprawl. It's out in the suburbs. When I grew up there, it was inexpensive, but now, so my friends, I remember, that grew up in the same town with me, they had to move out to Western Massachusetts, Air, Lancaster, like Leominster, all these places where I was in a town that was unattainable, but I attained it. And I had my tenant paying for the majority of my mortgage. So I was paying up nothing to live there, banking money from running my business and being in a beautiful apartment that I had renovated myself. So that was my first, I call it a house hack. We call it a house hack now. I don't know even what we called it, but I ended up refinancing that after a year, not even refinancing, sorry, doing a HELOC on it. Like I called my bank. I'm like, oh, Bigger Pockets, like do a HELOC, bird, this and that. I'm like, yeah, this sounds good. Let me look into that. The freaking bank gave me $91,000 out of a HELOC. I'm like, what? They're just, I can just have nine. They're like, yeah, don't go buy a boat with it or anything. I'm like, okay, this is incredible. But that, I couldn't believe how much equity in under a year I had generated just from doing that work myself and renting it out and showing a rent roll for the first floor. So that was incredible. And with that $91,000, I ended up buying another 2-family, another 2 commercial units, and the down payment for my primary residence now. So that went so far. I took that money so far. And that was money that I literally pulled from my first investment property. Then I'd stayed there for about 3 years. And in 2020, it was like the pandemic, the first year in the pandemic, which is a whole story. I ended up buying my primary residence in Concord, doing the same thing. It was off market, hadn't been touched since the original owners in 1964 did the same thing. But off topic, back to the first project, is then I moved into the Concord house and I kept the house in Littleton and I rented the upstairs. I couldn't believe the rent I was getting for the first floor. It was like maybe 2,500, the second floor, 2,500 something. So it was cash flowing good. But my real estate agent friend's like, hey, people are just buying anything right now, waiving inspections, paying over asking. This is a tricky little house that might not sell in the future where you should put it on the market now. You don't live there anymore, blah, blah, blah. And so that's what I did. So I think in 2021, I sold it it. And I sold the thing for, oh God, I can't even remember, like in the high fives or something, where I got it for 280. I pulled 91,000 out of it. I did a 1031 exchange on the unit that I lived in. So I kicked that can down the road. I made like so much money out of that one first house hack. So like I preach this to people that haven't bought in a property, like the first like white picket fence, single family residence dream house, like that one property just propelled me so beautifully. Even if I wasn't into real estate, just so beautifully into being set up in a better position for my life. So like say the sale of that house goes to down payment or white picket fence. Or if I wanted to leave that house and go buy my house in Concord, then I rent upstairs. Now I'm cash flowing like say $1,500 a month. That cash flow goes to my mortgage at my primary residence. So I cannot like preach enough doing a multifamily, at least a two family for your first purchase, especially if you can pull it off with an FHA and put no money down. So I love that story just because it was like a win, win, win. Another big point out of that was getting a good tenant. My first tenant ever was a good tenant. I lived upstairs. So like you don't want some degenerate in there. It was a good taste in my mouth. She put a good taste in my mouth. And that also, if your first tenant puts a bad taste in your mouth, real estate might stop there for you. You might not do rentals after that because I'm like, yeah, I could have a million apartments with tenants. Like, this is so great. They're awesome. Like, so that was a huge factor too. There was so many wins out of that one property. So that was my first house hack. It was kind of a flip because I did construction. It was kind of a buy and hold because I had a rental. It was a little bit of everything. And that was back in 2017 when I purchased that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an awesome story. It's like kind of similar to mine too. It's like, so your housing expense is pretty much 99% of people's is their biggest expense, right?
Yeah.
So house hacking helps minimize that expense, which then opens up so many doors for putting that money that you would put into that elsewhere, because you have a tenant paying for it. And then you have like your other income that might be coming in that you don't need to put that money to the mortgage. Now you can put it into another property. You can put it into other investments and other endeavors, and you can just be free money too if you want to just have fun. But yeah, it sounds like you did almost a house hack / like live and flip scenario, which is a combination of the two. I think they're the two best ways to get started in real estate, because you can buy a house that needs work. It could be a single family too. It could be a condo. It could be a 2-family, 3-family, 4-family. If you're living there and you start renovating it and increasing that equity with your own sweat and work, and it's going to be way cheaper than like hiring someone to do it. Plus you're learning so much too. If you want to get into real estate and you do it yourself, like you're learning how to do stuff. So then you can talk to contractors later. You kind of understand the pricing. You understand what jobs stink and what jobs like are actually easier. Like, and you can kind of like know if contractors are kind of BSing you a little bit, which happens. But yeah, it sounds like you got almost a home run of a deal right off the bat, because you snuck into a little 2-family for 280. You increased its worth. You probably got a tenant in there that was paying higher rent than before that was there. So when they got it like reappraised for your HELOC, they were probably just like, wow, yeah, this thing's worth a lot. When you got that first check of like the 91 grand, like did that click something in your brain like, oh, real estate is definitely the way?
I was shocked. I was like, I don't know if I was getting 30 grand. I didn't even know back then.
Yeah.
It was my first HELOC, but it was the first of a lot of things. It was first tenant, first HELOC, first personal construction project, first tenant, first 1031 exchange, all in one property. So it was like a lot of bases hit on that.
Did you do a lot of this just yourself, or did you have a mentor that you went to, or was it just learning like from bigger pockets?
It was really, yeah. I have like a friend who owns some real estate, and I have my father who's been in the construction industry my whole life. So I have some resources, but it was really like self-educating myself through bigger pockets and other podcasts and books. Like I just have a stack of books that I read on entrepreneurship, self-improvement, self-help, real estate, you name it. But yeah, I had to take the initiative myself because I didn't have someone telling me what to do step by step, but I just listened to a couple of different things I read and listened to podcast wise. And that's what told me what to do, which was great.
So one of the biggest issues with people that want to get into investing is they just don't take that first step. Did you have anything like in your mind that was like, this could go wrong, this blah, 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 or what did you do to prevent that mindset and just take action? Because once you take action in real estate, doors open up and you just start realizing what you can do with it. So
yeah, no, and I still have no hesitation to this day, which is wild because the things I'm getting into, the dollar amounts, the zeros is a lot more. But no, because I grew up in the construction industry, had the carpentry background, could do the work myself. I go into a place, and I'm also like, so I'm sitting in my office for my remodeling company, and I was a designer, I was a carpenter for it. Now I'm just a business owner, but I can go into a property and I can see the potential. Okay, if we take down this wall, we move the kitchen over here, we open up this. And so I had seen the potential in that property, and I had only looked at it for myself to live in. I'm like, this will just be a nice place to live. I didn't even think about how aggressively I was forcing appreciation in this. So I didn't really have hesitation then. It was the first like loan process process with FHA was like brutal. You know, they
Oh
put
yeah.
you through the ringer to get a loan. Now I don't even know how many loans I've done. It's just like another document to sign and fill out or whatever. But back then it was like, holy cow, they want everything. They're looking back through every dollar you ever put in. And there was just a lot. And that can be deterring for people and discouraging, but it's worth getting through and just being more comfortable with practice. Like I really, now it's like, I don't even think twice about that, where somebody buying their first house, and most people still, even baby boomer generations, maybe they bought one or two houses. It's a big deal for people. It's their biggest chunk of change that's changing hands. So it is nerve wracking. And I know, because I see my friends buying their first homes and stuff like that, but I don't think about it like that. I treat it like a business transaction. So as long as the numbers work, I go forwards pretty aggressively.
Yeah, people always talk about like the risk of real estate, and it's weird because society looks at like investing in stocks and stuff. It's like less risky. The way that I kind of lay it out is like when you buy real estate, you're buying like a physical thing, right? That you can manipulate with your hands. You can make better, you can make worse with your hands too, but you can actually see it, right? With stocks and stuff, you're basically betting on like the company or someone you don't even know or people you don't even know to hopefully do better. Like I think that's way more risky than buying into real estate. I mean, I think as you buy into real estate and you see produce some wins, you realize, oh, this makes sense and it actually works. And then the risk factor in your mind starts going down and down. And that's where like there's more zeros and more commas on deals, and you're like, screw it, it's just math. It's just math.
Yeah. And I do mine on the back of a napkin still. I mean, I got some spreadsheets, but I don't go too intense. What was I going to say on that? I forget. I had a thought for you, but if it comes to me, I'll mention it.
No worries. But awesome. Yeah, I think that's an awesome first story to talk about because it just set you up, get you going in real estate, and nothing like getting like a good win right off the bat too.
Yeah.
Now, if you were starting in real estate again, like going back to that before we get on to like what you're doing now, what is something that you wish that you knew, or like if someone was getting into real estate now, like what is something that you wish that you knew at that time when you got into it that you know now? Like pretend you were buying that duplex again, and like what's some things you would have changed? Anything?
I got to say, in my life in general, I don't have many regrets or things that I look back on that I would change, which is I just feel blessed for having that sort of life. But I do try to educate a lot of people in my personal sphere and stuff, and who comes along into my life about real estate and investing. I guess the only thing I'd say is maybe buy 4 units instead of 2, because the numbers are better. The numbers are better, like quantity. And I didn't realize I could buy up to 4 units with an FHA. So maybe that. I mean, again, I hate to say lucked out, but I more so like was fortunate, and like the time was good with the market, me being able to do construction, like vetting a tenant the right way, like so it all the pieces fell into place well for that one. So there wasn't I couldn't do anything different that would make a better deal, because that one was just so insanely good. So
Yeah.
on that one, but I would say if you can pick up 4 units, because then it's just better.
Yeah, I think that's usually like the only, I wouldn't say it's like a regret. It's like just telling new investors, just like try to buy as many doors as you can when you're young, because part of real estate, like part of growing your wealth, this stuff is time. So when you buy when you're younger and you have those properties, you're going to be much better off later in the future, because you build wealth through time in real estate. Yes, you can make money doing flips, make money doing like the forced appreciation and refinancing and stuff. But the real wealth is as you hold those properties, like later on, you're going to be like, holy smokes, I'm pretty well off.
It kills me every time even I sell a flip. It kills me to sell. Like rich people sell stuff, wealthy people never sell anything. Like I don't know where I heard or read that, but it sticks. So that is true. Time is very important. So the younger you get started, the better. And on that note, I look back at that property like a couple of weeks ago. Now it's worth in the 7. The one I saw, I'm like, come on, there's $200,000 more equity that I could have held on to for a couple more years.
Yeah, I do the same thing, and I got to stop. Sometimes I'm like, stop looking at old properties. You made the decision, just forget about it. Because I look back at like a condo that I sold for like 225, and like a year later it was worth like 275. I'm like, Jesus. And then I'll look back at like just sold an 8 unit, which I wish I could have kept, but I did the math. Basically, I'm like, hey, if I take that money and get a seed money to really go out on my own, I think the return of investment on that is going to be bigger than holding this property. But I guarantee you, in 2 years, I'm going to look back and look at that. I bet you they're going to sell it for like 1.5. I don't want to be like, no.
You got to jump off the deep end, and to have a little nest egg and pull it from that, it will be so worth so much more to you than that appreciation in that property. And that's something else that you just said that even backs up before you even buy your first property, is investing in yourself. And like I was saying, I was listening to podcasts, I was reading, I was going to networking events, doing anything I could to learn about real estate. And that's like what every investor guru says, the first investment is in yourself, and that's usually in the form of education.
Yeah, I'm in a lot of Facebook like networking groups and investment groups, and there's a lot of people in there that are like, I got 5K disposable or 10K disposable. what should I do with it? And I almost always answer them and I'm like, hey, you should just invest in as much education in yourself as possible before like you get into anything. So use that money to like read about books. I mean, not read about books, read some real estate books.
Books are
Listen to
cheap. Books are
podcasts.
cheap. Audio books, everything is.
Yeah, I'm like, do anything with that. Don't jump in anything yet. Just really invest in yourself until you almost feel so much information overload that it almost starts getting repetitive. And then at that point, take that action because that's when it's ready to go. And I always tell people that because everybody wants to get into real estate. They see all these things on social media like, oh, you can do this, this, this. One of the worst things you could do is just, I know we always talk about it and I say it too, you got to just jump in, but you need to educate yourself as much as possible and then just jump in. You can't just jump in because real estate is risky. You can, if you jump in blindly, you can almost bankrupt yourself initially if you really don't have an idea what you're doing. And I see with investors all the time, there's like wholesalers out there that really aren't too moral and they'll sell properties for not even the price it should for like a fix and flip. And a new investor is just like, oh, I need to buy something. They get emotional about it. They'll buy it even though it's not the right numbers at all. And then they start going through with it and all of a sudden they're going to lose like 60 grand. And it's like, that's a lot of money that you can really hurt yourself with. So educating is key. And then obviously taking action. You have to take action. You're not going to make money unless you take action. But talking about that a little bit and taking action and what you're doing right now, just let us indulge us a little bit about where your business is now in real estate investing and kind of what you're focusing on at this point. I know you do fix and flips, you're doing commercial stuff. What's the point of you doing the fix and flips instead of just holding everything and vice versa? And then why are you trying to get in commercial and what's your interest in that? Just expand on that a little bit.
Okay. So even to go back to your last question, because you're like, what's your first flip? That since the house hack wasn't really it, in 2021, I started Marchese Development. That's my flipping business, new construction, redevelopment. I had bought another 2-family in Maynard, Mass, and renovated it as a duplex, condominiumized it, sold each condo, made a bunch of money. And that was like my first actual purchasing this, doing the construction, definitely selling it when it's done. And luckily it went well. And that was only 2021 when I formed that LLC. And currently I probably have about 10 flips under my belt. Right now, under contract, I have my first new construction knockdown. So I'm buying a piece of property. I'm going to knock down the small house on it, and I'm going to build a 4,800 square foot brand new house to be worth upwards of $3 million when I'm done. I intend on putting like $1 million in construction into it. And that's pretty aggressive doing new construction. There's a lot that goes into it. So in that short period of time, 3-4 years, I mean, it's just really excelled. So with the flips or the new construction and the selling of properties once they're done, that is just to generate revenue, generate capital that I can then buy either more properties, pay myself, put some of that into buy and holds. But before I even bought flips, because I wanted wealth, I bought multifamily. So I have my own portfolio, different combinations of multifamily properties that I bought in 2019 that I still own and operate, or have property managers operating now. But I like to do a combination. So I like to do the fix and flips to build the capital, and then I'll buy more flips and new construction, but I'll also take some of the money and invest it in long-term holds, which are rentals. So that way over here, this is a business that's very easy to run, especially once you have a property manager meeting the buy and holds, because you just accumulate doors and you're getting cash flow. And that's a very secure business. The flipping, you got to make sure your numbers work. And that's building another business like that. You have to be aggressive about finding the deals, aggressive about getting your numbers right with the construction and getting the construction done on time, and then making sure you time the market so you're selling it at a win. So that's a tricky business. And then you also kind of need volume. You need to always have deals coming in as deals are getting finished up, or how many deals you can handle at one time. So I have those two businesses that I created in the last few years that have been really doing well, and I really love and enjoy. And oh God, I don't know what year Matt, Ryan, and I had started Blue Canyon, maybe 2 years ago now, because I was going to networking events, had met Matt and just was chatting with him, and he had raised money for buying multifamilies. I'm like, oh, I never thought about raising money. I always just thought I needed to use my own money. So now with Blue Canyon, so I met Matt. He had this ability to raise money. I had this ability to do the construction. And these were just kind of our natural talents. And then Matt's like, I want you to meet this other kid, Ryan. I say kid, and maybe they're younger than me, but he's been doing a lot of off-market marketing, and he is really good at acquisitions and finding deals. And so the three of us had set up a mastermind. We didn't even think to go into business together for the first year. We just liked talking real estate. And my friends and my family were so sick of hearing me talk about real estate because it's something I'm passionate about. I'd be on the golf course being like, oh, you got a multifamily in there. My buddy's like, shut up. I can't even pay my student loans. So like this gave us an outlet to talk about real estate and what we're passionate about, but it also the mastermind, Matt like structured it. They're very analytical guys, very intelligent, great partners. But we had a agenda for our meeting. Every week we would meet and discuss real estate, but we'd start like highs and lows. What are we doing? Da, da, da. So it was great structure and an outlet to talk about real estate with other investors and learn from them. And then after about a year of that, I remember I was like, these guys got a lot of talent. We all bring our own specialty. I'm like, we should just form a company. I remember setting up, like a Venn diagram you see in school, like the two circles and the overlap. Well, I set up a Venn diagram, whatever it's called, but our three names in it. I was like, I printed it out. We had dinner. I had the three of us at dinner, and I slid across the name like, guys, we should form a company. And I showed him. I had like Powerhouse Properties written on it or something. I just made up some business name, and we all considered it. And a couple weeks later, like we turned our mastermind into a business. So that was pretty exciting. And that business now running pretty smoothly. And for me, it was, I don't know, the third or fifth or whatever business I had started. So I had some experience there, but with partners. Now you have partners that your interests need to align. You have to vote on stuff. So it's an interesting dynamic and an interesting growth. And some partners are more conservative, others are more aggressive. So we all have to align on the direction of the business. And with Blue Canyon, we all fans of multifamily. So we started investing in 5-6 unit properties where it's something manageable. We could easily come up with the capital ourselves or raise it. And in the last year, got into larger markets. So now we're buying larger buildings, brick buildings with dozens of units in them. And we have property managers all over the place managing properties. And we just go in like same thing, kind of forced appreciation by renovating, raising rents, bringing up things up to market rent, creating a better community for the tenants to live in. And we also this year did our first flip. So it was a flip, actually, it was a property that I had under contract personally. I got busy and this thing just sat for so long. And like between the agent and the sellers, it was like an estate plan. So there's a bunch of people, whatever, it got all caught up. So it took forever. And I got busy and I was like, I can't do this myself anymore. Do you guys want to do it as a group? So that flip went from Marchese Development over to Blue Canyon. And then it was like, and Matt and Ryan more specifically, really wanted to try flipping. I'm like, this thing is right in my neighborhood. I've done this house a half a dozen times. This is a no-brainer. And so we all agreed to go in on this flip together. And I was saying to you earlier, we finished it 12 weeks, start to finish, and we put it on the market. The first open house, we got an offer $5,000 over asking. We've accepted the offer. I think the inspections were yesterday. So we intend on closing on that first flip. And that was good because it went well. It put a good taste in their mouth because they were counting on me. They're like, you've done the flipping, you know nothing about it. We're counting on you to do the construction. I just managed the construction of it. So that was good. It was successful. It wasn't a loss. It wasn't a windfall, especially when you're dividing profits, which is another thing I've been digesting in a partnership. But it was great. It was a great experience. And I think we'll be doing more of those and turning that more into a branch of the Blue Canyon business, as well as forming syndications and doing larger acquisitions of commercial property.
Yeah, and you hit a ton of things there. I just want to go back on so some of the ways you're structuring like your mindset and your businesses. I think it's super important. Like everybody talks about real estate and they're like passive income, passive income, passive income. Like I just want passive income, blah, 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 blah. Passive income so I can go lay on a beach and do nothing. And that's like what social media promotes and like everybody tries to sell. And it's like real estate really isn't too passive, to be honest. Even if you have property managers, you got to manage those property managers. But to move fast in real estate, I think you have to have some type of income coming in to then put your money into those passive income multifamily properties and stuff like that. And I think that's what you're doing with those fix and flips and new builds. That's kind of your active income, and that's your base of like where all your income comes from and where you can control the most and produce as much income as possible from there. And then you can then put that money into those long-term holds that then create the passive income, or as passive as possible, but way more passive than fix and flips that can then accrue more money. And then you can eventually use that money to buy more. You can keep on using the fix and flip money to buy more. And that's where your wealth building is like those properties. The active income is kind of what's allowing you to fuel and give kind of the fuel to that wealth building. And I think that's perfect. I think a lot of people fail to realize that is a way. And I think that's the best way to move really fast in real estate, because you kind of have more control over those developments and fix and flips, which you can control your active income a lot more and allow you to buy more multifamilies. Another way to do it, obviously, is raising capital, which you said Matt and Ryan and you can do with Blue Canyon. That's another way too. But again, then you get into splitting the profits and stuff, and you don't make as much money, but long term, it's very beneficial because you're all getting appreciation, equity, forced equity, things like that, building wealth that way. And then you touched upon masterminds too. Those are huge. I think we talk about Andrew Freed and Zach Gray before we got on this. Even Ryan was part of our mastermind too. I think Ryan was double dipping at masterminds.
I think he was. I remember him like, I gotta log off because I gotta know something like that.
Yeah, Ryan's
whatever. He loves everything real estate. Let him go.
Yeah, he loves getting involved with everything. But I did the same thing. We had a mastermind where it was 5 of us and we were tracking our goals, tracking our weekly wins. And honestly, like we went from a group, our mastermind, within a year, from like collectively owning maybe 10 units to 100 plus, just from us like keeping each other accountable. And that's a combination of everybody that was in there. And now I have partnerships like with people that were in there, and they always reach out to me. We always can talk about real estate and brainstorm with each other. So I think that's a huge thing that you mentioned there too, is get into like masterminds and get into like networking groups where you can actually talk to people doing the same thing. Because, you know, my friends too, I mentioned real estate to them and they're just like, like whatever, which sometimes I don't want to talk about real estate too. So it's fun to talk to my friends about not real estate, but you need those people that do want to talk about real estate and start taking action with you.
You got to surround yourself with like-minded people. It helps, certainly. And it really helps expedite it and allows you to learn just through simple conversations. Never mind a mastermind, but just talking to people about stuff and hearing other people's experiences and hopefully avoiding some of the pitfalls that they may have fallen into. Like I love talking to people about everything because that's how I learn. And if you're not, and you kind of like want to keep your cards to yourself, like, I don't know, it doesn't work like that for me. My cards are on the table because I want to show somebody, okay, this is my hand. What should I do with it? Get different advice from different people and things that I wouldn't think about, because you do get super focused and like, oh, right over here, instead of selling this, I could burr it or something, you know what I mean? Because you get, so focused on what you thought you were going to do with this. So yeah, like-minded people. Another cool thing that I learned, and this is just a random tangent, but you made me think of it and I'll forget if I don't say it, but I heard this somewhere. You are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So think of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and you're the sum, meaning like if there's some awesome, cool billionaire over here and there's some shitbag friend that you probably should have dumped because he's bringing you down from youth, like you're right here in the middle. So that's important. And a lot of people don't think about who they surround themselves with. I mean, this is kind of big picture, but this is the stuff that really is important. So you're talking about the masterminds and surrounding yourself with other people that are driven, maybe around the same level as you. Maybe one has a lot more experience and has built their business up. So you become the sum of that. So that's something that your listeners would be good to understand. It's just simple. It's just in life. It has nothing to do with real estate. That's just a life lesson.
Yeah. If you place yourself in a room with people that are like closer to the life that you want to live and further along than you, it's just natural instinct, I think, in human nature that you're going to strive to become them and keep going that path and learn from them too. They're going to help you learn and get to where they are, because most people in real estate have an abundance mindset, similar to like what you were talking about. Your cards always out on the table and everybody's there to help each other. Like, especially if like I'm well ahead and someone comes up to me and are trying to get into real estate, but they're super driven and I can tell that they're driven, I'm going to help them out. I'm going to show them kind of the ropes and help answer questions that they need to help them get to the next step. So if you can surround yourself with people that are not only where you're at, but striving to be better, plus people that are well ahead of you, it's just going to help you out. Just like you said, like you're the sum of the 5 people you hang out with, which is super important in life as a whole. But awesome. So I don't want to take too much of your time here, but I wanted to ask 3 more questions. One is a little bit more specific. I just want you to go through one of your favorite deals that you've done, like a fix and flip or a multifamily, other than your house hack, and kind of run into the numbers and how did you analyze it, and what are some things that you would tell investors that are trying to get into it to not skip over, like really think about this type of process. You don't have to go too in depth, but kind of like what are like your 5 steps of process for buying a property and like from start to finish. And it could be more than 5.
Your questions are in depth. I have to start taking notes so I make sure I actually answer all the parts to this question. I was already trying to think about, I mean, every one of my deals luckily has gone well and has been a different lesson in one form or another. But God, one that sticks out to me is, because I just sold it, I can talk about this. But before I even talk about that, analyzing property. So like back to Blue Canyon stuff. So that's the other thing. We get a lot of leads. We generate a lot of marketing, and that determines what we do with the property. So if it's a single family that's decrepit and needs to stay a single family, that might be a flip. Or if it's a multifamily that we can see cleaning up and increasing rents to market rate and holding, then that's how we treat it. Or there's all different ways to look at different properties. So we don't really say no, or we don't have a very, very specific target, because it's hard to find deals, as everyone always says. It's hard to find deals.
Yeah.
But so that's how we treat it. Whatever comes our way, we have to look at it like, what's the potential? If there's no potential in any direction, move along. If there's potential and we can't even take it on, we wholesale it. Like Ryan will just sell it to other developers or contractors or whatever. So we really do every facet of real estate between the three of us, which is really fun. And it keeps it spicy too, because it's not just one lane fix and flips or one lane passively holding. But back to my personal deal. So I had bought a bunch of properties in this town, all within the same neighborhood, like 3 in a year. And I was like, oh, this one's up for sale. It's a good deal. Then the one down the street, I'm like, I didn't even have the right to be doing this. But I was like, oh, I just can't pass this up. I'm like, so I bought a couple of duplexes right where I had done that first duplex flip that I was telling you guys about. And one, I'd done that thing for my daughter for her first birthday. I bought her one of the duplexes and I renovated it and I kept it and I rented it out. And the intentions for that, I don't know if you guys know this from Brandon Turner from Bigger Pockets, but the move there is buy it, rehab it, rent it, and put it on like a 15-year note and let the tenants pay this property down. And over 15 years, God, this thing's probably worth close to $1 million now. But now you have this mortgage-free property. My daughter wants to go to college. She can refinance. She can sell it. She can live in. Like, there's so many different ways. It's not like your typical 529 plan that grows like this thing. Your tenants are paying for this property. It's actually still cash flowing on top of that, which is beautiful. So that little cash flow helps subsidize preschool and stuff like that now. So I did that. And then that wasn't even the project I was going to talk about, but the one next door, I ended up doing the same thing because it was the same like style property. It was a 2-family. I renovated at the same exact time. So I literally had cruised like across the street from each other, doing everything at the same time, and ended up saying, I'm going to buy this whole neighborhood. It was all duplex. I'm going to buy this whole neighborhood. I remember standing in the middle of the street when I was buying my first property there. And, and now it's like 7 properties later in this neighborhood. But this one specifically, renovated it. I bought it for, let me think of the numbers, say $430, renovated it for like $150, and then rented it out. Beautifully renovated, 3-bedroom, 1-bath units in a nice neighborhood where they demanded high rent. So I was renting each side for like $2,500 to nice people that I personally managed this. Because it was like, oh, I can just do this one. I don't know why I ended up being the property manager. But shortly after renting them, getting the contract signed, I was like looking back at the numbers. I'm like, a property down the street, one side of those duplexes was condominiumized and one side sold for over $500,000. I'm like, oh shit, I just locked myself into a year lease. I'm like, I probably should have just condominiumized those and sold them and took the money and deployed that capital and other things. Whatever, I kind of forgot about it. But then come the spring, the leases were up. I'm like, I'm going to, not renew the leases, tell the tenants they have this much time at the end of their lease, they'll move on. And they were like young couples, like ready to buy their first house. Because I remember one of them, this is what made me think of it. One of them was like, can we buy this property from you? Or can we at least buy our unit from you? And so that's what got me thinking. Yeah. So then the lease is up and I decide I'm going to sell the property. But before I sell the property, and this is so key, was condominiumizing it. So it took me like $15,000 between an architect, a surveyor, and my lawyer drawing up the condo docs to legally separate this duplex into 2 different units. So that property as a duplex, when it came time to sell, maybe would be worth in the high 6s, low 7s. But each unit, I sold each side, one side for $475, one side for $480. I had a mortgage on it for like $413.
That's crazy.
So I just sold that thing and made like $500,000. Like, this is a whole thing I got to deal with on the back end with taxes. But like, I couldn't believe how much the appreciation jumped in the short time that I owned it and what people were paying for condos in this town. And just by taking that $15,000 investment, like out of pocket, like it had already been done, construction was done. This was like, I got to condominiumize this thing for $15,000 to make a few $100,000 more on the sale. And so that was the move. Like, I've really like specialized it in condominiumizing properties because the values were so much more. Because think about it, the pool of buyers for a 3-bedroom, 1-bath condo trying to get into a nice neighborhood, start their family, maybe a young couple coming out of the city, finally can work from home, whatever it is. That's their demographic. That's the target market. You have such a large pool that can buy a condo. Who's looking for multifamilies? Investors, people that are looking for a deal on a property. So to buy, and it's a much smaller audience that you're attracting to selling this multifamily, and they want a deal. So that is a move for all your audience out there. I love condominiumizing properties that are clean. I like a cleaned division, but it's very lucrative. I mean, I know a lot of people do it, but man, that was such a nice windfall.
Yeah, I think there's so many ways to make money in real estate. And I think condominiumizing, I always get that word weird. It's one of the best ways right now to like really enhance the amount of net profit you can make from a property, because with the rates being so high, especially with like multifamily properties and stuff, maybe the long-term rent on it doesn't really work right now. But if you think about, maybe even flipping doesn't really work where you're going to get it. But if you look at like condomizing each unit, all of a sudden you're adding, like you said, like hundreds of thousands of dollars on top of it, because the supply is so low still that there's a lot of buyers out there that want that kind of starter type home, which are like condos, right? And usually there's condos in like very desirable places as well. So it's like the best case scenario for all three to then make a bigger profit. It's not that complicated, as you said. Like you just need to have a good lawyer. You just need to have a good like architect to really draw out the plans, create an HOA, even if you have to, make sure that the town is okay with it. And I guarantee you most towns are okay with it because it supplies more housing and they can tax those condos even more. So they make more money. Right. They don't really care as long as it's safe. But like you said, you could like turn something that could have sold for like 680. Now you sold them collectively for like $950. It's like, holy smokes. Was that worth $15,000? Yeah, it was. So that's awesome. That's like a good little nugget that people don't think about in real estate, is that there's so many ways to make money. And if you're creative with it, you can make even more.
I don't know if I answered all the questions within your question. So
that was perfect. No, that was perfect. But awesome. Let's try to wrap this up because I've had you here for almost an hour and I know you're busy. You got a couple businesses to run. So I'm going to finish off with just two questions, really. One of them you kind of hit in the beginning, but I just wanted to ask, and I asked this to everybody, like, what's your favorite business, investing, or real estate book that you would recommend to anybody?
God, yeah. I mean, Rich Dad Poor Dad, just for the basic, you got to start there. But because I started as an employee and I really like Cash Flow Quadrant. I think that's the name of the book that I talked about with Robert Kiyosaki. Like, I really like that because it helps you understand the different mindsets of people that work within the different segments of society. And some people aren't made to be entrepreneurs or business owners or self-employed. They like structure and they like the security of their W-2 job. And you can't hate on your friends that don't want you to talk about real estate because they just like their job and maybe they do well and that's okay for them. They can support their life. But I love that because it talks about the mindsets and how you can move from quadrant to quadrant. I haven't read it in a long time, but it's definitely helped me a lot.
I still have to read that book, honestly, to be honest.
That's a good one. Yeah. It's good timing for you to read that too.
Yeah, for sure. I should just order it today and read it. I think I'm going to. Yeah, Rich Dad Poor Dad obviously is a fantastic book. Rich Dad Poor Dad is so good. It's like a college class. Like it just really opens your mind.
You know what's another good book is by Tony Robbins, Money Mastering the Game, I believe it's called. It's thick. I'm not going to lie. It's a thick one. It's a little intimidating, but like it's an easy read and it's not even necessary for real estate, but it's for understanding wealth and money. And it's like the most basic principle, like just don't spend $6 on a latte every day because think about how much that adds up over 30 days and how money works. And it was fascinating because he's this wild guy. Like everyone knows Tony Robbins for motivational speakers, but he did so much more. He like surrounded himself and went and interviewed like all the highest net worth individuals in the world and learned from each one of them and just put it in this book. So you don't need to go surround yourself with all these rich people. Like literally you can get all this information in this book. And that was one that I read a long time ago that just helped me understand finance too, just basic finances. So I would highly recommend that to people. Between Rich Dad and Poor Dad and that, like I've literally sent my friends these two books on Amazon, like please read this so you can somehow get ahead in life. Like if you just read these two books, you'll understand money well enough to be better off than like 90% of the population, which is crazy.
Oh yeah, for sure. It definitely that's true. I got my girlfriend reading Rich Dad Poor Dad right now. I told her to do it. I gave it to her.
She can then understand what you're up to. She'll understand.
Yeah, she's loving it too. She's like an insurance, so she's a kind of an entrepreneur too because she does insurance broker. So it works for her too. And you said something else there. Oh yeah, that's $6 for a latte a day. Like it adds up. One of my buddies, he always sends us a little tracker because he used to vape a lot or smoke cigarettes. Two of them of my friends, and they had a tracker of when they stopped doing it, like when they stopped doing it, like how much money they're saving. One of them in a year is up to $14,000. That's how much he was spending on cigarettes. And like seeing that, he's like, I'm never freaking smoking again. Are you kidding me? That's like a quarter of my salary a year. Like, what the heck? And then the other one was like $8,000. I'm like, Jesus, it adds up.
Honestly, the other simple thing, just again, I have so much freaking information I can share with people, but like another simple thing that I just try to have, like my closest friends do, and that I've done for a long time, is just have a budget sheet for your life. Like nobody even knows what they spend on what and why their money's gone at the end of the month. So like with us and lending and stuff, we're always doing personal financial statements and having to understand how much money we make and where our money goes and how much we have left to invest. But like everyone should just do that, even for their regular income, just to understand this is my income, these are my expenses. Where can I cut down? Or do I need to be driving this car with this huge number on it in order to take some money and bank it, maybe just to save, maybe to invest? But like, it's crazy how many people live above their means in the United States, and having a budget sheet and seeing all the numbers in one place is, I mean, there's apps for it now too, but it's very rare that anyone even thinks to do that for themselves. It's really sad.
Yeah. And that's one thing, like anybody that wants to get into that, I don't agree with a lot of stuff that like Dave Ramsey says, but he does do the budget thing like very well. Like that's something, like if you guys want to get into budgeting and things like that, just go follow Dave Ramsey. He's not a big person on real estate, so like don't listen to that portion of it, because I don't believe in a lot of stuff that he says there.
But like for basic understandings of your finances, he's a good place to start, and he's
perfect. Yeah, he's excellent with that. He breaks it down Barney style. It's like the simplest way. But all right, and this is the last question I always ask everybody, and it's basically just to tell people how to reach you, and if there's anything else you want to tell the audience, such as like your social media handles, meetups that you run or attend, any charity events, business links, or where to contact you and things like that, just share it.
Yeah. So you guys can follow me on Instagram, and maybe you can put a link in this, but also follow Blue Canyon Equity Partners on Instagram, more importantly, because that's where we do all our social media content. That flip that we just finished, you can see all the rails, the progress throughout that project, which is good because it gives a good insight, good order of operation. We have newsletters that go out once a month that my team produces. It's good content. It's good information, good learning opportunities for people that want to invest actually passively. We have that on there. Check out our website, bluecanyonequitypartners.com. But yeah, between those two, I can be reached pretty easily.
Awesome. And I'm going to put all that information in a link or the description as well, so you guys can easily reach out to John and see what he's talking about. But thank you for coming on, John. It was super informative. I bet you we could have talked for like 3 hours about this stuff, but we'll have to have you on again in the future as you start growing Blue Canyon. I always say Blue Equity Canyon, Canyon Equity Partners. Yeah. And then as your developments go on too, and you're fixing flips and more colonization, it'll be awesome to hear your story if you come back on too, and where you came from and how much you've done.
It's happening fast. So yeah, check back in next year.
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to get everybody back on like within a year of being on, just to be like, where are you now? And then people will see like how fast you just people move.
No one's gonna be in a worse position at the rate that we do this thing. So yeah, it was great talking to you. Seriously, I really enjoyed this.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you, John. Peace out.
Have a good one.